when you see really spectacular cultures where people are loving what they do and thriving and companies are growing, both on a P&L, but also just you can see the magnitude of impact that they're making in the world. That didn't just happen by accident.
Welcome to Powered by Instinct, a podcast for professionals who think about how your fundamental nature drives performance. If you're interested in getting more done more naturally, then let's jump in.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Powered by Instinct. I'm Amy Bruske. I'm the President and the Integrator here at Kolbe Corp. In season 1, we got to talk to Mark O'Donnell, who's the CEO and visionary for EOS Worldwide. But today I am so excited to add to that conversation and have some fabulous insights from our guest, President and Integrator of EOS Worldwide, Kelly Knight. Thank you for joining us, Kelly.
Amy, I am thrilled to be here. I've been looking forward to this for weeks.
Yeah, I know. I'm so excited to have some of your wisdom shared with everyone here. As a reminder, my 4 Kolbe numbers are 3583. Kelly's 4 Kolbe numbers are 7752. And Kelly, we're going to talk a little bit later about your MO and your journey and how you got to where you are in EOS in a little bit. So for everyone listening, let me just define. EOS stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System. Kolbe Corp here, we run on EOS. It has helped us tremendously. It helps us with our structure, just how to structure the business, but also some of the tools are really important, I think, for as a company is changing and growing rapidly, making sure that we have some simple ways to make decisions. So the tools kind of take it to the next level. And we'll be talking about that in a little bit. What I love about EOS is they have an abundance mindset. So everyone stay tuned until the end because I want to talk about how you can get your hands on some of the free tools that EOS offers that you can start using right away with your team. So I love that. So thank you for that. All right. So there's this lovely intersection of Kolbe and EOS when it comes to the people part of the business. We're going to be talking about creating healthy teams. We're going to talk about why building an intentional culture is critical to growing businesses. And there is a new EOS book. For those of you on video, I'm holding it up now that this is an advanced copy, but I'm so excited about the fact that the people part of the process is so important that you guys have actually written a book about it. So we're going to talk about the people book, Dare to Build an Intentional Culture. There's some unconventional ideas in there, including maybe the word love. So I want you all to stay tuned for that. We'll talk about that a little bit. All right. So Kelly, you have such unique insights into rapidly growing companies, not just because of what your role in EOS, but all of the thousands of companies that you're working with worldwide. Tell us about the people component. Why is that so important?
Well, Amy, first of all, from my perspective, it is just everything to me. People is everything. No matter what kind of industry or business that you're running, people is central to everything. Anything that you want to accomplish as an entrepreneur starts with people. So that's really at the heart when we interview organizations, some running on EOS and some not running on EOS. At the center of it, 82% of all entrepreneurs say that they're just not getting enough out of their people. And what an amazing impact that either has if it's working well in your business or if it's not working well in your business. So it feels just at the heart of a good place to start out of the 6 key components of EOS, following the first book in the Deep Dive collection, which was all about process, written by Mike Payton and Lisa Gonzalez. So this is really the second book in the Mastery series or Mastery collection at EOS. And we decided to go with this one next out of all 6 because it really is that important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and as you're saying, this is what keeps entrepreneurs up at night, right? When we talk to them, it's like, oh, it's the people. It's not just, are we not getting enough out of them? It's all of the other challenges that go through that. So what are some of the most common problems that companies running on EOS face right now?
I mean, there's a good handful of them, Amy, but I mean, under the theme of not getting enough out of their people, it just starts with getting what we call RPRS, which stands for right people in the right seats. It's a combination of adhering to the core values of an organization and at the same time making sure that that individual is truly getting, wanting, and having the capacity for the seat that they sit in. And so at the heart, it's really trying to help entrepreneurial companies see that, people really is not just a nice thing to have. It's a critical thing to have to whatever it is that you're trying to achieve in your 10-year focus or your 10-year target. So it really starts there. Beyond that, it's really attracting great talent, retaining great talent, And just end to end in the entire life cycle is really creating an opportunity where you have a lineup of people who can't wait to come work for you because they hear such great things about the people and what you're doing in the mission, cause, purpose, and passion, which is a high attractor in today's world. No matter whatever the generation is, there is more of a trend toward wanting to feel connected to something bigger than themselves. So those are kind of the issues on both sides, right? So business owners and entrepreneurs, the issues that they're dealing with, but then also everyone out in the world who wants to be connected to somebody who has something that appeals to them as part of their own personal core focus that they want to be a part of.
So how does you said, it's so key to attract the right people and then keep them. I know you talk a lot about values. Mention kind of what role values plays in that and any key tools that you feel are most useful for people.
Mhm. So there are a couple really key things that we do across the board, no matter what seat we're hiring for. And one of those truly is Kolbe. I mean, that relationship that EOS Worldwide has had with you and your team, Amy, for very long time, even predating my coming in as the integrator 8 years ago. And it has been so fundamentally important because we're really trying to understand the DNA of the person that is really sitting across from us, having a great conversation. And so the more that we can understand what really makes that person tick and how do they really work in their most natural state, Colby is so great for that. And we really desire it greatly to make sure that we're getting the right match from the very beginning because we realize that if we're not the right fit for somebody, we want to know as soon as possible for their benefit just as much as ours. So Colby has been absolutely instrumental every single hire. Another thing that we do is we ask very open-ended questions, hypothetical questions about in certain situations, how would you respond? And we're really looking to see, is the response in connection to our core values, being humbly confident, grow or die, help first, do the right thing, do what you say. Is there a connection to that? Would that match how we would want the behavior, words, and actions to resemble how our current team already exists? And if there's a disconnect or we feel like it's just not quite in alignment, we're able to flush that out pretty quickly. And then I'd say the third thing beyond Colby and open-ended questions and kind of storytelling that will elicit is also something that's Shannon Waller wrote a really brilliant book. I talk about this all the time, probably one of my top 10 business books of all time. It's called the Team Success Handbook. I'm holding it up for those who are able to see visually, but Team Success Handbook. And it really describes, it's such a tiny, small book, but so succinctly describing what is an entrepreneurial organization compared to a bureaucratic organization, because we really run, even though we continue to get larger as an organization, we really want to have that entrepreneurial spirit. And so it perfectly depicts kind of the chemistry that exists on teams that kind of roll that way versus being a larger organization that may be just a little different. So those are the three biggies.
Oh, thank you. Oh my gosh, you brought up so much. There's so much richness in all of that. First of all, mentioning Shannon Waller's book, everyone at the Team Success Handbook, we give that to every new employee. And as you were mentioning, it's just a small little booklet, but it just goes over these 12 principles of what does entrepreneurial behavior look like. And we pull it out every year when we do our big conference, because that's when we need some of the highest level teamwork. But I found some of the big ahas in there, just as you were mentioning, is the difference between an entrepreneurial company. We only get paid for results. So the idea that I worked really hard on this project, if the results weren't there, that's all that matters. And so it's been an interesting conversation about that whole time and effort economy. It really is about, the results that we get. And so not just how much time you put into it. So I love that. And it does start with, I do find that companies tell us the most. Kolbe gives them that insight on, is it going to be just this sweet spot for this person? Because no amount of just kind of forcing somebody into a role that long-term does not fit their strengths. As a leader, it just is so frustrating. But what we really know is the employee, that level of pain and burnout isn't sustainable. And so if you really care about this employee, kind of setting them up for failure. And it starts with looking at this resume that looks amazing on the surface because all the skills are there. And so I think when we give that too much, when we're looking at that too much, that doesn't work. So you had said, first, look at the strengths. Certainly, is it a fit? Second, values. So you did do some really good questioning around values alignment, which is huge. And then the third is just make sure that they have that entrepreneurial mindset. I love that. That's a great model.
Yeah, that's right. And something you said, I think, is such a great prompt too, which is we definitely get paid for results. And also, it's got to feel pretty good along the journey, meaning if we get to the results, but it feels clunky and awful and abrasive and friction filled the entire time we're working together as a team, not to mention individually, that's pretty rough. Like that doesn't build a great culture. And that's where the intentional culture comes in and having the courage to hold those standards really high for the benefit of everybody that you interact with. So I think all too often we're sometimes, right, we're growing quickly as organizations. We have certain seats that need to be filled, and we can sometimes compromise a little bit like, well, there's 70% there, it'll be okay. And most of the time, in my experience, it just isn't true, especially if the 30% or whatever percent you're compromising on are the really important things. Like, well, it's just off a little bit on Colby. Like, it's only 3 degrees of difference,
Yeah.
and we know that that just doesn't work. So that's why we have Colby consultants on our own team, right? That know how to really read these things. And they're the truth tellers in our business on our HR and people team, which I really value. Is this really going to be okay or is it not going to be okay? And so part of this is the truth serum of being reliant upon tools that are so good and so selective at helping us really get it right and not discounting them. And Colby is one of them where it is tried and true. And if it is not a fit, we just won't do it. And we have saved ourselves so much in pain and agony of having to reset and do another search again by just relying on tried and true methods, which we consider Colby to be.
Sure. Well, give you a little bit of objectivity because here's the deal. We're all human beings and we have these internal kind of biases that if you and I connect on a level where I really like your personality or we have something in common, sometimes you fall in love with a candidate and that candidate is not going to execute the way you need them to. So we might have other things in common, but we need those objective measures to kind of say, hey, this is really how this person is self-recording. This is what they need. They've told you what they need, right? By filling out that Colby A. So that's
100%. Yes.
so go back to something you said. Let's talk about intentional culture. What does it mean to build an intentional culture? Because that's a big foundation of what you're doing in the book.
Yeah, it's absolutely critical. Again, it's in our business world underrated. Okay, so let's just start there. In my opinion, very underrated how important culture is, how important core values are, how important it is about just being intentional. And it really starts there. It's that there is no intentional culture that is positive and healthy and growing. That doesn't exist just by happen chance. It's not an accident that that happens. It's that when you see really spectacular cultures where people are loving what they do and thriving and companies are growing, both on a P&L, but also just you can see the magnitude of impact that they're making in the world. That didn't just happen by accident. That is really truly being dedicated and thoughtful and putting a ton of energy and thought and consideration into making sure that you're building something of intention that you're proud of, not that you show up 3 years later and you're like, hey, I was hiring all these people, but turns out that didn't work out as well for me. So it really just starts there by acknowledging that it takes courage. It is hard work. It
Mhm.
really is. I mean, in an organization where you maybe don't have the kind of culture that you would like, it can take a little while. It can take 12 to 18 months to turn it around because it is going to get worse before it gets better. And that is really hard. It's a hard pill to swallow for an entrepreneur who may already feel a little overwhelmed or that, the business is growing at a rapid pace and they don't have the luxury of stopping to slow down. But it is the one thing that if you truly put people first and you do slow down and get really thoughtful and intentional about the steps that it needs to take, because there is a roadmap. It's written in the people book and it's all in the US tools. That's the good news. On the other side of some pain is a lifeline to your future that will really reflect something that you're very proud of. And it becomes something that, I know for many entrepreneurs, this is a legacy. They're building something really important and the results do matter, but it's got to feel good along the way too.
Oh my gosh, that's such a good point. And honestly, when we first started implementing EOS, we already had a set of values that we used and they were really kind of more ground rules. So they were solid, but there were too many of them. They weren't really established well. And so going through the process of what EOS told us to do with the values was so huge to look at, even just to look at some of the top performers that we had. Who do you want to replicate? What was true about them? And really getting back and saying, do you have a culture that you aspire to? These are our values, these are our aspirational values, or are these the reality of what they really are and what we want them to be? And all of that made the biggest difference in the world. So just going through and establishing those, we tightened it up. We got down to 4 core things. They've absolutely played out It's fascinating to hear people say, I love our values, and other people who work here saying, I love our culture. Like that is the one thing that, but it takes a while, totally worth it. So thank you for saying that, because I do think that that's huge. And as you said, you're laying out a roadmap, like the tools are there for you to use. So
They really are. And understanding that people are not static, meaning that people grow. Their Kolbe is the same, right? That's consistent.
right.
However, the capabilities to learn and to grow and to expand your thinking really does evolve. And so sometimes what also happens in organizations is you can kind of revert to the default. Somebody is this certain way, and you forget that they have the capability to become new and different things by way of training and going through programs and coaching and all of these other things that we have accessible to us today. And so in the book, there is this dynamic which really kind of puts skill and challenge to the test. So if you have more challenge and to this against skill, right? Those are the two things we're measuring: challenge for an individual role versus their independent skill. Well, if their skills are increasing and you're not giving that person enough challenge, they're going to get bored. And if that person's skill set is growing, but yet there's too much challenge being thrown at them, they're going to become anxious. And
Yeah.
so it's trying to find the right along the path is having the right combination of challenge to the skill that that person has as they continue to grow and evolve. And so in that sweet spot is what we call the GWC channel, which stands for the get it, the want it, and the capacity channel, which continues to grow and evolve over time. So when you're having your meetings with your independent members of your team, in quarterly conversations, it's important to recognize, where were they a year ago? Where were they last quarter? Where are they today? And am I delegating and elevating enough to them, also based on their Kolbe, enough challenge, just enough challenge that they're continuing to grow against their skill set? Or have I given them too much or something that's outside their unique ability and they're becoming stressed, or too little and they're getting bored? So really measuring that over time is an important component to making sure that each member of everybody on your accountability chart is in that sweet spot.
I'm so glad you brought this up, because I do think it's fascinating. We have employees that have now been with us over 20 years, like quite a few, certainly tons over 10 years, 15 years. They have changed so much over time. But I've experienced in my career promoting someone to a point where all of a sudden there's this level of stress and having to really figure it out and say, wow, that challenge, as you're saying, just went up to the point of now almost debilitating this person. And we have to constantly be calibrating what is the sweet spot. And it almost reminds me of school. So those of you that have kids, think about the fact that if your kid is super smart and they're not being challenged, they're going to struggle in a totally different way, because now they're bored. Now they become troublemakers. They're bored. You're not really using them. That's not great either. So not enough challenge is a problem, but then too much challenge is certainly an issue. And so to be constantly looking at where is that sweet spot, I think I love that kind of intersection of skill and how much challenge you're giving them. So, that's a good thing for all of us to keep thinking about, that it's a constant calibration, and the person in the role themselves have to be a big part of this conversation. They need to speak up. They need to feel like
Yes.
they can honestly say, here's where I am. And you need to be checking in with them. So we're all responsible for our own careers as well. But as a leader, you really have to get a handle on that, a sense of it, because your top performers don't tend to like raise their hand and go too much. Like, we know they'll keep pushing through until it's too
They
late.
will.
So
They
let's
absolutely
remember
will.
the people you lose are those top performers.
Right. And, creating that open environment for people to, without judgment or criticism or shame, be able to say, hey, Amy, I'm really feeling like I'm outside my comfort zone. Wondering if we can have a conversation about that. Being able to open that up, or to be able to ask, how are you feeling about all of these new projects that you've been taking on? And just being willing to hear anything that they say without criticism. I think at this point, I have heard every possible response I ever could have gotten to any of these questions, and it's all okay. But I think as managers and leaders, we need to create that really open, vulnerable, able to be completely open and honest environment for that. And, when you think about Kolbe, I will often look at teams, and we can run the matrix of what a leadership team looks like and where we have too much crossover and not enough. We have holes on teams. But when I think about Quick Start as just an example, somebody who has a very high quick start might need a little bit more introduced into variability or trying new things or experimenting or learning. Someone with a lower quick start might need a little bit more time to adapt along the way in which they're learning on their career path. And so it's just keeping that in mind and how you communicate, how you work with them. And that's where I also think Kolbe fits in beautifully with EOS is in that quarterly conversation. Every 90 days, we're sitting down with each person individually who works for us and able to talk about all the things that they're experiencing and using the tools to, again, help us just refine and fine tune the journey in working together. It's hugely helpful.
That's right. Yeah, thank you. Because there are different MOs that I work with a lot of leaders of sales teams too. And I'll talk about how the ramp up looks very different sometimes with different MOs, but I'm like, it's worth it. So somebody had this 8 in fact finder who was kind of accommodating, I think at a 6 level and quick start. And I said, have the patience to allow this person to get to the point where they are feeling more like an expert because they strive to have expertise and depth of knowledge and they're going to be a rock star. But you've got another person who has a very different MO. They're going to be on a little bit of a different path. And sure enough, that plays out. So, that's great. Okay, let's move to one other thing. I want to talk a little bit about, there's a lot of consultants listening. So we have a lot of our own Kolbe certified consultants who listen to the podcast. And I know that at EOS, you have implementers. That's what you call the people who are helping organizations as experts implement EOS. What does a consultant, do you think, working with some of these teams need in order to be successful right now? Or what's one insight or tip or anything like that that you could give to consultants for what do these organizations need from them?
I'm going to go to humans need this, but certainly applies to consultants, which is heart-centered leadership. And this is where the love gets introduced. And it does, this whole theme around this can be very uncomfortable for a lot of people because we tend to want to think of love as this romantic kind of love, but that's not what we're really talking about. We're really, in this sense, we're talking about love as heart-centered leadership, which just means truly showing up with genuine care and concern for one another, whoever we're sitting in front of, whether that's an individual, a team, an entire organization, consultants and EOS implementers, really being in tune with that. There's the EQ component, there's IQ, there's EQ for emotional intelligence, and then there's also something called LQ, which is a love quotient. And I think being really, really great at what you do in any case requires all 3 of those to show up. So getting the most out of people being real true maximizers and multipliers, as sometimes we talk about with strategic coach, really requires that you're showing up with that genuine care and concern. If you can start there, I always say, please do not become a manager or leader if you don't have genuine love for people. I would say the same thing as a consultant or an EOS implementer is if you don't just love people and love coming first to help and do the right thing, it's probably maybe go select something else to go do. So I would say that's the biggest place to start because it's so woefully lacking in our world sometimes that wherever we show up, if we can just start there, it's a pretty darn good place to start and build on all of the themes and whatever issues or projects we're working on. If it starts there, it's going to be pretty good.
That is so enlightening. And that I teased a little bit at the beginning of this podcast. There are some components in the book that I find people might think are a little bit controversial or strange or whatever. But when you really think about the business case for putting the love in it, it's being able to be really honest. If you really care about this person, you will share with them exactly the ways that you already know you can help and where things might not be going right. And I remember this story at one of the EOS conferences where a woman stood up in the audience and Gina Wickman, who is the founder, everybody of EOS, was on stage. And she said, this might be me, but I think it was a woman. Here's the challenges I'm having. And he's like, yeah, it's you. I mean, he basically, she's like, I'm having this problem. I think it was with a specific employee or whatever, but he said, yes, but let me tell you, I think you're the problem. Everyone kind of laughed, but I think everyone else has also been in those kind of positions where I know I have something that I can say to this person that's going to help them, but it's really hard and it makes me uncomfortable. But if you love them enough, you will share that information, tell someone they're in the wrong role, even though they want it and they really think this is best for them, but you help them make hard decisions. It's about the hard decision
Oh, it is so about, then this is where there's the intersection of having the courage and being daring coupled with that heart-centered leadership. I mean, let me give you an example. I mean, it's happened time and time and time again at EOS where it could be me or it could be another manager recognizes that someone is just not the right person for that seat. Most often it's not a core values issue. It is just a GWC, a get it, want it capacity for a particular seat issue. They might not even be able to see it, the person who's being impacted. But two things can exist. You can serve the greater good of the entire organization and individuals at the same time. That's another huge myth in business that you can't do both at the same time. It's either you're choosing the company or you're choosing the individual. But what happens is rarely anything combusts or implodes when you have this conversation with a person. Sometimes it's an opportunity for improvement and that person can get back on track and we can fulfill the needs of the seat through GWC. But if it's a capacity issue, oftentimes it's just not possible. And so a different decision needs to be made. They either need to move into a different seat or potentially leave the company. But I will tell you, I've had many people say they don't agree with my decision. I've gotten pretty comfortable with that over time when I believe that I'm serving the greater good, right? And their greater good too. But I've also had equally as many people come back and say, you were kind of right. I wasn't the right person for that seat. I'm happier where I am now. I'm genuinely happier. So that fuels me to always remember that I don't always get it right. I am, as humble a leader and I make mistakes all the time. But I am in a position where I've got to really use all of the tools that I have at my disposal and also my experience and intuition to just do the right thing that I can for people. But that's heart-centered leadership. It's very practical, Amy. We think of love as being this ooey gooey, like kumbaya, standing around a campfire, holding hands. But really, it can show up in simple ways, like if you're getting someone a technology tool that makes their job easier, that's putting the love into the work that we're doing. We're prioritizing people. Or it could be that I take a clarity break so that I can be in the best headspace before I have a maybe difficult conversation with someone so that we have the best outcome. It's those little tiny things that love is pervasive in the fabric or being woven into just the day-to-day actions, words, and behavior.
Right, absolutely. I often say when I do a Kolbe seminar with a team, congratulations on how fabulous that you work for a company that cares so much about helping you discover your own strengths and making sure that you love your job and those kinds of things. And so it really it's a nice way to kind of wrap up the Kolbe and EOS tie because one of the things that we can really do to serve our people is help them discover what's really natural for them. Sometimes people have spent a lifetime working against this and they actually get themselves into roles along their career where they're getting rewarded for exactly what's working against their grain. I've met people all the time that have done that. And so they just keep getting more of that. So getting that clarity and saying, I care enough about you to like make sure let's figure out how to tap into these strengths and align things to your role. And if that's not possible, let's figure out if there can be another role or if it just doesn't work here. So yeah.
Right. Well, and I
Right.
mean, Amy, what could be better than helping someone find their God-given unique ability and using Kolbe and other tools to do that, to show up and uncover the thing that they never would have found out on their own. I mean,
Right. Right.
to
Absolutely.
see people light up from inside, to be able to do something they love so much. It's pretty remarkable.
Well, so that brings me to you because we're talking about other people discovering their strengths. Let's talk a little bit, first of all, of what was your path to EOS. And then I would love to also hear getting your Kolbe result. What was that like for the first time, too?
Oh, now that's a funny story because that predates EOS too. So, well, look, I spent a lot of my career in the financial services industry. I had my own financial advisory practice. I sold it. I did a startup. I did a recovery kind of registered investment advisory thing. And anyway, long story short, is I landed EOS. So that was about 8 years ago. The interesting thing is I had been sitting at my desk in the financial industry about 6 weeks before I got the call from the recruiter thinking, I am not meant to do this. Like, I mean, it is really a cool opportunity that I've had all these years. I'm so blessed to have been able to do it. And it means nothing to me. I mean, which is kind of a scary place to be in thinking, I've spent 18 years doing this. And suddenly I'm like, this isn't what I'm really meant to do. And so I actually prayed on it. And truthfully, 6 weeks later, I got the call from the recruiter. And I had said, talking to the Lord, I'm like, I will do anything that comes my way, no matter how different it is. If it's not financial industry, whatever it is, I will follow. I will try anything. Well, Fortunately, what was sent my way was EOS. I never heard of it before. I had taken Kolbe before at other organizations I had been a part of. And the last one that I'd taken before coming to EOS was in transition. That's the way it came out. It like wouldn't even compute. For listeners, you know more what that means than I do because I'm not a Kolbe consultant, but I felt like I broke the system. Like there's really something wrong with me.
Transition nails people every time, right? It just meant you weren't free to be yourself in that moment.
In
So
that moment, no, I was not, and it
yeah.
was very clear to me, but, anyway, so I was super excited to learn about EOS while I had not been in the EOS community. I had not been an EOS implementer. I had not worked for a company running on EOS. The closest I had come is I had read Rocket Fuel. Someone had handed me Rocket Fuel and said, "I think you're an integrator." And I read it and I thought, "Oh, that really does read like it's me." So, that was kind of how I got into the EOS world is by happen chance that, I got a call from a recruiter. And so in discovering my strengths, I think it's been just a very long, bumpy road, honestly, Amy, over time of trial and error, the things that I like and the things that I don't like. I know one of the things that I really, really love, and I think it's in my upper left-hand quadrant for delegate and elevate, is LMA, and that stands for leading, managing, and holding people accountable. I truly wake up every day and I feel so fortunate to be able to work with the team here at EOS Worldwide, not just the leadership team, but we have now 140 people on the team. 8 short years ago, I was the first W-2 employee. So we've had quite a bit of people growth over that time.
Wow.
And it's really just a huge people focus. I love our EOS implementer community. We just got back from our Dallas QCE where we had 700 people in one space. And it's just pure joy for me to understand how people tick, what makes them think and work and believe what they do, and to harness human energy, getting all arrows pointing in the right direction to achieve something remarkable as an organization by way of people. I think anything related to that is kind of my unique ability and my God-given talent. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
What a perfect fit. Because like you're saying, going back to the three parts of the mind, you're able to use some of your skills. And granted, you had been a business owner before and sold your company and all that. So you knew what it was like to be in a rapidly growing company and an organization. But the fact that these are things that fit your Kolbe ammo and you love to do, how perfect. And let's actually talk a little bit about some of your most important collaborations. Because one of the things I know about you is you're a fabulous collaborator. I've seen real time how much you're the glue that holds people together. And you're in a similar situation to mine. So in EOS world, everybody, there are key relationships or key positions really in an organization, a visionary and an integrator. Visionary being the person that's really driving the future and coming up with lots of ideas, and the integrator being that key partner in all of that to execute on those kinds of things. So at Kolbe Corp, David Kolbe's the visionary and I'm the integrator. And in your case, you have Mark O'Donnell, who's the visionary, and you're the integrator. So everyone, Mark O'Donnell's MO is, I believe, 2210-2, something close to that. And then Kelly is a 7752. So tell us how those two things work together. How have you seen your Kolbe strengths play out? When do you maybe drive each other crazy? Whatever it might be.
It's really interesting. Mark and I have been Visionary-Integrator duo for about 3.5, going on 4 years. And really, truly, it has been, from my perspective anyway, you might get a different answer from Mark, but I think it's been a very natural fit. So I'm a high fact finder, high follow through, the 7-7. Mark is much lower in those, but it's interesting because he doesn't show up that way. So I think it's through high responsibility that he loves research. He loves tinkering in the workshop as a visionary, loves big relationships. I do too. And so I think that just harmoniously ties well together. While you might think, looking at the Kolbe, that would create a tremendous amount of friction, right? And I'm quite sure there are times I drive him crazy with details and wanting to be very specific about how we maybe go execute in ways that interest him less. But I say this time and time again, and I think it's, our Kolbe is, interestingly, I do think fit well together, but we treat kind of the relationship that we have with great honor, that it's really like of the level of you might do with like a marriage, right? You put a ton of intention into it. And so talking about intentional cultures, intentional relationships, I think we are so passionate about EOS that it really helps us move through those moments when there's maybe a little more friction filled. He wants to move faster and I'm pulling back, as an example, on a quick start because he's a 10 and I'm not. And it's more than just a degree or two difference there. It's just that we're just so committed. We're like, okay, well, let's just figure this out. Let's just take one step at a time. We will figure it out. And so I think that's really at the end of the day, it's through that intentional piece that we've talked about today.
Absolutely. Yeah. You guys are always on the same page and share values about where you're going. So I think that synergy that you have with your two very different MOs play out. I do think, Mark, every once in a while, for the Kolbe community that are certified, we talk about how the cognitive really affects things. And Mark has this background, I believe, as an engineer. Am I right about that?
That's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
so I think he has a lot of expertise and learned behavior around information and data and how, data-driven decisions are really key, but he's a good simplifier too. So I think cognitively that too in FactFinder simplifies, but he's so driven to make sure that we have good information when we're making decisions. And the differences you guys have, David Kolbe and I have similar differences, especially in FactFinder. I mean, he's the best partner that I could have because he is doing some of the legal and finance and detailed kinds of things. I'll take that information and then I'm communicating it to other people in a more simplified way. So however that looks for visionary and integrator duos, what I want to say to our audience is there are key relationships. There's magic that happens when you take people with shared values, but with some different strengths that come to the table. You can have this amazing multiplier effect, but it has to be the right person. And so I know you guys really focus on visionary integrator relationships, especially, and making sure that those are right, because that's driving everything else that happens in the business. And you guys are such a great model of that. So I love watching that in action. We've worked with you guys long enough to see like, how does that play out? And you really stay in your zone and do your best work together.
We really try very hard at that. And I also really respect his strengths, even though they might not be mine. And I think that he would say the same too. So even if there are those moments where, say, as an example, he is being very quick to want to move forward at something, I'm also recognizing that that's his gift. And so when it matters, there's some of that compromise or give and take about when we do just move forward. And there's a lot of trust that's involved in that, just like Patrick Lencioni teaches in the trust pyramid. When there's a lot of trust, sometimes you move forward with something a little faster than maybe what you might ordinarily be your MO because you're working together. It's a partnership. So I think that plays a role for Mark and myself too.
Yeah, the speed of trust is that really does play out. Okay, before we move on, anything else about your Kolbe strengths and discovering that? I know it was a long time ago that you got your result. I don't know how that played out in financial services. I'm just curious. I see all kinds of Kolbe results, but based on what you were doing before, how was that a fit compared to now, or what did you see?
Amy, I would say it's very similar because I was running a financial industries company at the time. And so I was serving financial advisors that served clients. Well, today I serve US implementers who serve their clients. So I think by way of the model, it was very, very similar. And I just stumbled into it. Some of that is just pure luck from time to time that there were these roles that just happened to have, I think, a natural fit with my skill set. And that had nothing to do with my being particularly great at picking the right roles for me. I think they chose me, maybe is what had happened there. But the similarity in how I was working and how that fit into my natural MO was pretty cool.
Oh,
Neat
that's
to
great.
see that it transcends industries, right? So
Yes. Oh my gosh. Congratulations for that, because that's huge. Being able to be doing something you love and you're in the zone with your strengths too. Hey, let's talk about the People book launch and all of those things. So the new book that we mentioned is The People, Dare to Build an Intentional Culture. And you wrote that book with Mark O'Donnell, who we were just talking about, and CJ Dubé, who happens to be a Kolbe certified consultant and our implementer here at Kolbe Corp. So I know that launches soon, April 2nd, 2024. And for all of you listening, it might be past that time by the time you listen to this podcast, but you can pre-order it now. Tell us a little bit more, anything else in the book that you really want to highlight or talk about that people should know.
Just the most important thing is that there is a solution to this problem. And most people don't fully understand that they do not have the intentional culture that they believe that they do. So I would just welcome the opportunity for you to read the book. And it will basically tell you in chapter 1, here's the good news for those of you that maybe aren't the biggest fan of reading, although this is going to be out on Audible as well. Just read chapter 1. It's going to give you everything that you need to know, whether you have the readiness or the capability. It's the right time for you to really take that next step. And if it's not, you're great at chapter 1. But I do believe that there is just such gifts in EOS that many entrepreneurs who've been running on EOS for a long time have learned by way of experience, practical application of those tools. I do think that the book is just the shortcut to getting to kind of the heart of some of them a little bit faster, and it goes deeper on them. So I would just say the book is just a great roadmap, and it creates the ability for you to see kind of what's possible. What is possible in your world that you can't even imagine sitting in your seat today because all you know is where you've been in, right? How does a fish
Yeah.
know when it's in or out of water? So that's what I would say is just kind of trust the process and know that EOS is a great, great set of tools and a system and a process for getting everything you want from your business.
Yeah, and I talked about the fact that you guys are so generous with the tools, and you really do cover quite a few of those in the book too. So everyone, and there's some great case studies and stories in there too. And what I love about it is it's really simple, but as we all know, things that are really simple are not always as easy to do. So I think you're pretty honest about the, hey everybody, here's what you really need to do. This is easier said than done sometimes, but I think you've covered the most critical parts of managing people and the challenges of where it goes wrong and how to make it a little bit easier by giving everyone tools. So I appreciate that for sure.
Yes, and this all stemmed from Gino and Don Tinney, his integrator business partner way back in the day. Is really we give the entire toolbox, the 20 tools, away for free, completely downloadable at our website. So if you visit usworldwide.com and just go to the toolbox, it's all there for the taking. And it's a great complement to the book itself. So we want nothing more than abundantly to help entrepreneurs truly set out on a journey to get everything they want from their business and live their ideal lives, which we call the EOS life, which is doing what you love with people you love, making a huge difference, being compensated appropriately with time left over for other passions. I mean, that's a pretty great tidy bow on life. If we can help you get just a little bit closer to that every single quarter, every year, we'd love to be part of that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. The people life. I mean, that when you describe that, that's the dream for sure. So, okay. Thank you so much, Kelly. Tell us where people can go to learn more about the amazing work of EOS and how to get the book.
Just visit usworldwide.com. It is all there. We have a landing page just for the people book with all kinds of tools. There's a culture checkup assessment, which just takes a matter of a few minutes to kind of get a sense of where are you at in terms of your intentional culture. And it gives you also some solutions, some tools to download and videos to help support you no matter where you sit on that journey.
Oh, that's great. Everyone, go do the culture checkup. That's a great way to start. I love that. And the fact that you have videos ready to go. You've got everything, everyone, whether it's the book, whether it's the audio, all the tools. So go take advantage. And Kelly, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and just being so generous with your examples and your stories and what you've learned along the way. As always, the best place to start to learn more about Kolbe too and the freedom to be yourself is by taking the A index. If you haven't already done that, go to Kolbe.com. But of course, Kolbe.com has all kinds of other information for you as well. All right. Thank you
Amy.
again, Kelly.
Thank you, Amy. It has been such a pleasure. We are so lucky to be partners with you and the whole Kolbe team. So thanks for having us.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. See you next time.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Powered by Instinct. If you enjoyed this episode, then follow Powered by Instinct wherever you get your favorite podcasts, or join us online at kolbe.com/podcast for all the latest episodes.